Welcome back to the I'm Book podcast. I have Christine Sadry on today with me. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, April. Wonderful to be here.
So, Christine is our brand new author of the book 13 Years Lost, an unbelievable story of fleeing communist Poland to traveling the world serving the United Nations. So make sure you hop on over to Amazon or to christinesadry.com for a link to go straight over there and purchase her book. It's an incredible journey of her coming to the United States from Poland at age 9 alone. You heard that right, alone. And her journey through a very traumatic childhood with adoptive parents and finally finding her way to the United Nations and serving our country all around the world on peacekeeping missions. So you're going to be excited to hear everything she's going to share today in the show. And let's start off from the very beginning, if we can. Let's talk a little bit about your family and what it was like growing up in communist Poland.
Communist Poland was very difficult, of course. I lived in a little village close to the Soviet border. We were behind the Iron Curtain. Winters were cold. I had three sisters. So life was very difficult. You knew you were behind the Iron Curtain. You knew that there was something that you weren't going to be leaving this country, that something happened. You didn't fully understand as a child, but you knew that there was something different where you were.
What were your relationships like with your siblings? Talk a little bit about your family and maybe some of the things you experienced as a kid. Did it feel like you had a somewhat normal childhood before all of the kind of proverbial shit hit the fan for you? Or, in what ways did you experience childhood in your early years?
I think it was quite normal. I had two older sisters. One I loved, Ella. She was like the one that you choose, and Teresa was a little bit different. We had our differences, but as a family we played and went ice skating. And I have a memory of going with my mother. I must have been 3 4 to the dentist, to another town. And the first time that I ever was in a bus, and I saw gypsies, and they were all dressed up and playing tambourines. And I realized there was this other world out there. And went to the dentist, and without any medication. I remember being in so much pain and pulled my tooth out, and we went back. But I remember being on a bus and singing that I was so happy to be out with my mother. We had hay rides. It was farm, so you had fresh fruit and strawberries. There was a strawberry patch. So life was difficult, but it was normal. It was a loving family. I didn't see my father. He was always working, but my grandmother was there. I had sisters. I had neighbors and friends, and it was a normal life, I would say.
You have this family life that's normal. As most kids, you grow up and whatever is normal in your own family is what is. And so you have a very traumatic experience happen to you pretty early on. Let's talk a little bit about that and what happened with your mom and then what the fallout was after that.
I remember my mother, I was 4 or 5 years old, that she was ill. She was a lot of times in pain, sometimes laying down. And I remember her suffering. And I just never knew, I'd never understood it. And at one point, she gathered me and my sisters together and she said, "I'm going to the hospital, but I'll be back soon." And I remember that one moment, we huddled around her, we hugged her, and she left. And of course, as children, we just were waiting for her to come back, and life went on. A few days, maybe a week later, I don't know exactly the time frame, but news came. My sister Elizabeth came from school and told us that she got notice that our mother died. And I remember a lot of the neighbors and friends coming to our house, and everyone was in tears. And I cried. I didn't understand death at that time, but I remember also crying with them because everyone cried. And then the uncles and aunts came to the house, and then everyone left. They took, my sisters went, My baby sister, Joanna, who was only 9 months old, she went with an uncle. My two sisters went with an aunt. And within moments, after my mother had died, the whole family was gone. And I was just left there with my grandmother. And my father left. I didn't even understand much about that. And it was just the two of us. So, in like an instant, my whole life was never the same. It changed.
And how old were you when that happened?
Five. I was 5 years old.
5 years old. I can't imagine what that must have felt like having, a sister of my own. And I have three daughters, and you have a daughter, and having a family experience where all of a sudden now your sisters are no longer part of your day-to-day life, and your mom's not there, and your dad's gone, and now it's just quiet probably, and it's you and your grandmother.
Very quiet.
Yeah. And then a few years later, you had an opportunity. And how did that come about for you?
My grandmother had some family in America. Well, I used to hear her talking about America. It was just the two of us, and in the evening, there was no such a thing as TV. So you would sit and you would talk, and she always spoke about America. America, this, first explain Iron Curtain, how we were behind the Iron Curtain, we were part of the Soviet Union, and you're trying to understand all this. And she always spoke of America was the greatest place. This is the Holy Grail. And one day I was 8 years old. I was walking in my village, maybe going home or just visiting neighbors. And I ran into someone, and he said to me, "Do you want to come to America?" And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I've heard about this place, this country from my grandmother. This must be my destiny." That this person out of nowhere in my little village asked me, "Do you want to go to America?" And of course, I thought to myself, yes. I immediately said yes, because first, my mother was gone, my father was gone, my sisters were gone, and I was just there in this little village with my grandmother. So I was thinking, yes, this is where I have to go. And I remember once I heard that, I went back to the house and I went to my grandmother, and I knew that something legal had to be done. You just don't get up and go. So I'm like to my grandmother, I'm saying, make sure that papers get signed. And that's how it all started.
It's amazing too to think about behind the Iron Curtain, like you said, there's no TV. To think I'm going to America and your grandmother has told you about this dream, and to know as an adult now how far that is for an 8-year-old to even fathom how big the world is and how far they're really going to be going. It's kind of like kids don't understand money, right? Like a dollar, you give a little kid a $1, $100, and they don't know the value of that. And for you to have been like, yes, I want to go to America. Of course, that sounds like an exciting, it's like, let's go to the carnival down the street, you know? And for you to have had that sense of adventure, though, that you then took with you for your entire lifetime, I think is so astounding that you didn't have fear of that. Or did you think, who is this man? Like, how did he find me?
I didn't even go that far to think about it. I heard about it. I thought about it. So when this person was there, it just felt like it was my destiny.
Mm,
I had no fear. It just felt like this is what I must do. This
yeah.
this is meant to be.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, you were manifesting your destiny at age 9 from communist Poland. So anyone else can, rival that. I mean, that's amazing. And we won't give away your whole story because, of course, you have to buy 13 Years Lost. This book will keep you up at night. We just launched it 2 weeks ago. I
It's
just got an
sold out.
email. I just got an email from someone who told me, oh, I can't believe this story. I couldn't go to sleep last night. I was up reading it for half of the night because this is how much adventure is in this book. So you said yes, and you end up coming to the United States. Tell a little bit about that experience of getting here as a 9-year-old alone?
My grandmother, of course, very sociable, very loving woman. She had gifts. She prepared gifts. You don't come with nothing, and so I know that she made some different things, pillows. I don't know, whatever. There was this suitcase full of gifts, and my uncle Marion came to get me to the train station. So my sister Elizabeth came with me, and my grandmother walked out with us and to begin the journey. I remember my grandmother had a new dress done for me so I would look pretty, and I had the gifts. One of the most important things as I was getting ready to leave, I thought I must remember my address. Not that I didn't know what would happen, but I thought, I have to memorize this address because you never know. But I just sat there for the next maybe 6 months, 8 years old, and it's a very long Polish address. So I remember like every day studying and remembering I must remember this address. So I have remember the address, and I go with my uncle, my sister. They take me to the train station, and my uncle Marion was going to take me all the way to Warsaw. But I was saying goodbye with my sister Elizabeth. I adored Elizabeth, and so was going through all these feelings of missing her and telling each other, I will write to you, and I miss you, and I love you, and don't forget me. And of course, she's saying the same thing to me, don't forget us. And even with that, I was so happy and so anxious just to get on this journey to go to America. So we get to the airport. There was a photo of me at the airport. They had me stand on the chair to take a picture. I don't know why they did it. It's in the book. I got to the plane. They put a sign because I was underage, and a stewardess was going to oversee, that I arrived there. And of course, we stopped in Greenland for refueling. That much I remember. We arrive at JFK. I come out of customs, immigration, and the stewardess comes out with me, and no one was there. And I think she stayed for a few minutes, but of course, she had her own duties. She wasn't going to stay with me forever. And she left. And so I was there alone. And I'm thinking, okay, now what? No one was waiting for me. I didn't see my name. I didn't see anyone. I saw people coming and hugging, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is going to happen to me? First, I'm thinking, they don't even know how to speak to me. We don't speak the same language. So how will we communicate? And then I'm thinking, well, if no one comes to get me, are they going to send me back? Then I would have failed at 9 years old, and that would have been terrible. So I just sat there, imagining things that could happen. I just had no idea. So I just had to just sit and wait. And then finally, I don't know, maybe half an hour later, or however, this man that I remember from Poland, my village, he came up and he's, hello, I'm, in Polish, I'm your father, and got my stuff, and we left for Philadelphia.
Well, it's an incredible story to think of a 9-year-old girl. I mean, 9 is so young, so young. Now in today's world, right? We don't even want our kids to go, ride their bike across a busy highway alone, to go get a Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
it's like, we want to know, where are you? What time are you going to be back? Text me if you're running late. And, for your family to have had the trust in this man to assume that he was going to be there on the other end in the days of technology when it's just like, bye. And
Yeah. And you're at
really,
the end of the world.
yeah. So now you're heading to Philadelphia. What happens that first night and into the next morning? Like, how was your first experience in
Well,
the United States?
the main thing that I noticed driving back from New York to Philadelphia was all the lights. It seemed like the whole world lit up because, Poland town, there was no such a thing as street lights and car lights. And I just remember my whole world was just shining brightly. It was so lit up. And it was evening that we were driving. All the streets were lit up and all the people and all the cars. So I was in awe of seeing all these lights and this vibrancy of America, this country. And we arrived quite late in the evening. Everything, seemed fine. I met my adopted mother who didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any Polish. So of course, smiled or made a sign. We went upstairs and I had this nice bedroom. It was done in like pink. And I was just so happy to have a mother and a father, a loving family. And I remember, got the pajamas and took a shower, whatever, and went to bed. Excited, but I must have been exhausted because I went to sleep. And the next morning I wake up, so happy to be, part of this world now. But then I looked around the room and everything that I came with from Poland, the pin in my hair, was gone. Everything. The gifts were gone. My clothes were gone. The suitcase was gone. Everything. Every single document. It all was gone. And I remember having a bit of a uncomfortable feeling. I wasn't fearful, but I just remember thinking, there's something not right. Things just don't disappear like that. Everything was gone and they acted normal. So of course, I didn't say anything. And at one point, I remember walking out of my room and I saw another room nearby and there was a padlock on it. And I remember thinking, everything, my whole life, my whole past must be in that room that's padlocked, that I will never see and never know. And I did never see it. It always was padlocked. My journey in America began.
And that is just a small sliver of what was to come in the years to follow. And I think about from a psychological perspective now as adults, to do that to a child, to take away all of the belongings that they have and make them feel, like
So alone.
all alone and almost
Everything
like,
was gone. Everything.
and the fact that you couldn't speak to your mother because she spoke no Polish and you spoke no English at that point, you couldn't run and say, where's my bag? Where are my gifts? I have things for you. And I wonder if, growing up in communist Poland, maybe at that time too, did you learn about not questioning people, older than you, or, like having that almost like a fear of authorities maybe or something? Because
Not really, but I did have fear because I was in a foreign country.
yeah,
I didn't know a soul. I didn't speak the language. I knew no one. And I was 9 years old. So I just decided that I would like see what would happen. I was too afraid to even ask because
right.
I understood already inside that this is something that was not right.
Yeah, and it's interesting how in built inside of our body systems, right? Our bodies alert us to dangers.
Yeah.
Even if we can't explain it or we don't know, we don't have evidence. Like you saw the padlock, your stuff is gone, you don't speak the language, you're in a new country, and your body's telling you, something's not right here. And so what ensued for the next 13 years, which is why the title of your book is 13 Years Lost, had to do with what happened to you then. So let's talk a little bit about the title of your book and what that has to do with your story.
maybe a week passed when I was with my family, and I still was sort of believing that things would be okay. So I remember asking my father that if I could write a letter to my family, letting them know that I'm okay, which would be normal.
Yeah.
And so at that point, he seemed receptive, and he said, go ahead. And I made sure not to say anything. I have arrived safely, I'm okay. And that was it. So another week or so passed by, maybe by then, maybe 2, 3 weeks. And I'm a child. I started to miss my family, my sisters, my grandmother. So I said to him, can I write another letter just to let them know and how I'm feeling? And in that letter, I said that, I love them and I miss them and I'm thinking of them, folded and gave it to my adopted father. And he came back to me and he said, what is this? You have no family. You cannot write to them. You are ours. We have you here. You have no rights. You will never write to your family. We don't want you to speak about your family, and you will never see your family again. And you will never write to them. And then my whole world was shattered. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, now what? So,
Mm.
and I wasn't even able to let them see me sad, because that angered him. How dare you be sad? We've taken you out of this situation, brought you to America. You have no right to even be sad. You should be so grateful. And so I was even afraid to cry, to put on a face, a mask, so I wouldn't get yelled at, or he would get very angry. And I would just wait till they went to sleep, or I went to bed, and I would just silently cry for the next many years, because that's all I could do. I never saw my family again for the next 13 years. A lot of other things happened. I tried to contact them. It was intercepted by an evil postman who fraudulently said they were my family, and which I felt that this was something, the letter was wrong. So just things kept happening to me in my life. And that's the reason I started to write things down, because I said, this is, all these things that are happening to me are not normal. Not to be able to write to your family, to the point where they even didn't want me to go out of my house for many years and talk to people, because they didn't want anyone to know that I was adopted. It was just a very, very strange situation. Even though they had taken me to school, because I arrived there in like September. So I was enrolled in St. Mary's of Częstochowa. And even there, instead of, I thought I would learn some English, there were nuns there, and this Sister Olga in fourth grade, which I was put into, never bothered to teach me anything. I never learned anything except to cover the whole school's books. And that's all I did for a full year. So I didn't know whether I had a learning disability, or I just didn't know what was going on with me. So not only did I have these adopted parents who forbid me to even mourn my family, my sisters, I was in school where for the first year, I never learned the language. So even the communication with my mother was difficult, because we didn't talk either. So my father was the only person, and he only thought that I should be grateful that he adopted me, and that I just didn't have any voice in my life, anything.
It's really so heartbreaking to know that you went through that. How devastating to have a child with trauma of losing her mother and losing her family in Poland because of that death. And then your grandmother taking the role of your mom and exciting you about America and the opportunity, and then to come and then to receive such terrible abusive treatment. And in the book, she goes into detail, Christine goes into detail about what happened during those 13 years, because not only was she not able to talk to her family through letters, and her family was, of course, afraid that something bad had happened because they weren't hearing from her. And there was no way to communicate at that time, obviously. But there was a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, and things that the fact that we're sitting here talking right now, and if you're listening on audio, Christine's got a beautiful blue shirt on, and her hair is, she's one of the most gorgeous women you'll ever see.
Sweet.
And for her to be able to tell this story, to share the story with a lens of, yes, I went through this, and I still made my life amazing. Because I think that there's so much psychology and things around childhood trauma and what that does to people, and how it can stunt them from really achieving their dreams, or, people that stay in therapy for decades and never make any progress and blame their childhood on why their life didn't turn out right. And certainly if anyone could have done that, you have all the credentials that you could list about the first 20 years of your life to say, woe is me. I was dealt a bad hand of cards. And so that's why I, never made anything of my life, for example. And I think what's so inspiring about your story, and why I think readers will be staying up all night reading this book, is because Christine goes into detail about those 13 years, but that's not the end of the story, because Christine then made a decision to let that be the past and to move forward into what would become a 30-year amazing career around the world with the United Nations. And so I want to just talk a tiny bit about that pivotal moment, because I think it's so important for people to hear who may have had childhood trauma or may have had difficult experiences, where they would love to hear some hope and some encouragement about how do you get past that and make a decision to move forward and not let that define you.
One of the things I realized maybe within me was that all those things that happened to me, even though I still haven't found my family, I was on my own, but I felt I had to let the anger, the hate, the loneliness, the sadness, I had to just let it all go. I don't know how to better explain it. I just felt that if I were to carry all the pain that these people gave me, it would block my life. It would be, they would always live in this memory. They would hold me back. Those memories would hold me, they would be like chains pulling me to this misery, to this negativity, to this hate and sadness, and so much sadness, so many tears. And I remember thinking, I can't live like this. I have to let it go. Just close that door. Close that door and never look back. Even though I would have wanted their love to accept me, to say I'm sorry, to say anything. I knew I would never get it, ever. Within me, I just felt that the only thing I could do to restore, to get back to life, was just to let those memories be that, even though they still were inside my heart very deeply. I mean, sometimes I would cry at commercials that would bring me back. But I had to let that past be the past. Think about the future. What can I do? What is the next step, without thinking about all that happened, that I can make into my life? And that became my focus. Is just, I wasn't looking at what happened. Even I thought about my family. I thought, okay, I will look for them eventually. I remember the address still.
Yeah.
But I even have vividly have this moment where I literally made this decision in my mind, my psyche, my heart, to let these people go. Let them go, let them live their life. And now I needed to start with my life. Just from the beginning, from that very moment where I left with nothing, no documents at one point, I left with nothing. And I thought to myself, okay, now it's all up to me. Anything I do is all up to me. Any mistake I make is all up to me. Any good thing that I figure out in my life, everything I do, whether it be education, whether it is not taking drugs, whether it is trying to be in good company, I realized that moment that everything I did will make now my life. They made my life for all those 13 years. Now I had the opportunity to make my own life. Whatever mistakes I did or did not would make my life.
And that's such a powerful way to sort of encapsulate what this book really brings to you, that you've really brought the reader, is that our decisions and the way we choose to move beyond challenges, traumas, abuse, unwanted things that come into our life. And we all have them. We all have things that have, in some way or another, rocked our world, not in a good way, possibly, and that we have to make a decision. And I love that you said you made a decision. I made the decision. That was then, but now it's up to me, and I accept responsibility for what I'm going to do with my life moving forward. And I think that's such a key element of healing, is choosing to not be the victim of your past and to say, I'm responsible now for me, and I'm going to take responsibility, like you said, for my education, for my decisions, for my jobs, for whatever bills I need to pay, for my child when you had your daughter. And all of those things, I think, show through so brightly in what you tell in the rest of the story, which when you read the book 13 Years Lost, you'll see this experience happen right before your eyes, where Christine made that decision and how that impacted her, and how that one decision to let it go and to move forward changed, it reunited her with her family. It brought her around the world with the United Nations. It brought her the love of her life and so many more amazing moments and memories. So I'm so grateful that you wrote this book, that you had the courage to share your story, because I believe it will help so many people. And it will be a story that's this beacon, sort of like when you first came to America and you said there's lights everywhere. It's almost like your book does this. It brings light into probably dark places in people's soul, where they feel like, I've lived in so much darkness. I don't know where the light is. I don't know how to get to the light. And I think you've shown in so many ways how making a decision and taking responsibility and letting things go is what brings that light. Make sure that you go to Christine's website, christinesadry.com, SADRY.com. 13 Years Lost, an unbelievable story of fleeing communist Poland to traveling the world, serving the United Nations. Her picture that she mentioned of her standing on the chair right before she was put on a plane to come to the US is on the front cover. And you can see how young she was at that time. I'm just so appreciative that you chose to walk this book publishing journey with us here at O'Leary Publishing. Christine had an amazing online book launch party. She had an amazing in-person book launch party, and this is just the beginning of her adventure, her next adventure as an author. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with about your journey or your experience with book publishing, or your hope for the book, or for them as a reader of your book?
Once I finished the book, I just didn't know how to get it published, what to do here in Naples. So I decided to Google. O'Leary Publishing came up. There was a telephone, and so I called, and they said to go to the website, and I decided, no, I'm going to call. So I called again, and they said to go to the website. Finally, I went to the website, O'Leary Publishing, and they were having a bookend event in 2 weeks. And then I thought, my God, this is the destiny. So I took my stuff and I went to the event. And of course, I met you, April, and Heather, the editor. And I am so grateful and so thankful. You, both of you, you are wonderful. And thank you for helping me with and launching this book and being there every moment, every step to get it to where it is. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Aw, that is so sweet. Thank you. Wow, that was an unsolicited compliment. I appreciate that.
But
And
it's so
we
true.
were so honored. I feel, as a book publisher, it's work that I feel is so meaningful to be able to bring people's stories into the world. It's like the ripple effect that we'll never probably know the real result of, because the book now is something that will live on long after both of us have left this whatever realm of consciousness this is we're in right now. But and someone may discover it 100 years from now and read it. And so I think that's such a cool thing about writing a book, is that you just never know who's going to find it and when and how it's going to speak to them, and how your story, with such courage and with such honesty and feeling that you poured into it, will really help others. So thank you for trusting us. Thank you for being on the podcast today and sharing your story. And for those who are listening, be sure to visit Christine at christinesadry.com, where you can get a link to buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy your books online. Be sure once you read it that you leave a review. That's always appreciated. And be sure to buy a couple copies for friends and get together a book study, and read it. And it's a really great book to read and discuss together about how we can redefine our past and move on to our next adventure and make our lives great. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much, April.